How are you doing, YouTube? It's your friendly gamer SmartEntity here. Today we're going to have a head-on comparison between a 6 polarity Opticor versus the Dread as well as the Paris Prime. Now the Opticor is a top tier weapon that was released with update 15 along with the Helicar, so most of the video will be focused on this weapon, but we'll put in some gameplay of the Dread as well as the Paris Prime just for comparison sakes. So as usual, we'll have a quick look at Warframe Builder. So I have the exact same build over here for the Opticor. Now, notice that I have put Shred here to mimic the normal build I have here, which, to be fair, is not the best build to use if you are doing a 60-minute plus T3, T4 survival, but for everyday gameplay, Shred is a better mod. The reason for that is the Opticor has a base damage of 500. Now, for anyone that's been with the game for more than 10 hours, you would know 500 as a base damage is freaking huge. It's humongous. You just don't see that kind of damage for base damage unless we're talking about Arcwing. Now, what does that mean? It basically means once you do a max build, even, when I have all these, attack rate increase mods on there, you're one-shotting pretty much all enemies for everyday gameplay. So anything less than 20-minute survival, anything less than 15 waves defense, you pretty much one-shotting them. Even heavy gunners, if you do a headshot, you should one-shot them. And to be honest, I've done T3 Exterminate here. Now this is, a bit due to RNG, but I would say most of the time I can one-shot heavy gunners with this build, even if I don't do a headshot. But to be fair, again, that does depend on a lot of things. For example, some of your squad members may have rifle amp. I usually use corrosive projection, so that obviously helps. And of course, you got things like molecular prime and whatnot that all come into effect. But from everyday gameplay, this particular build can pretty much one-shot all enemies, hands down, regardless of whether you do a headshot or not, provided the enemy is less than level 30-ish. Alrighty, so let's have a look. Total damage, 12,700-ish, sustained DPS, just under 8,000. The way I usually explain these numbers is total damage is how good you are or this weapon is at taking down a enemy with one shot, and sustained DPS is how good this weapon is at killing a high level enemy, so something like a level 150 heavy gunner. Now interestingly, the total damage for this weapon is higher than sustained DPS. The reason for that is, of course, you have a charge time with this weapon, and the reload speed of this weapon is not very kind. To explain the build, we have Serration, Split Chamber, Essential mods, you should always have them on there. Heavy Caliber, you should have it on there 99% of the time, or 90% of the time, whatever you're going to call it. On this particular weapon, I've actually not noticed any decrease in accuracy with Heavy Caliber. Even at 60 meters-ish, I can still do pinpoint accuracy, still do headshots very reliably. So for this weapon, there's no reason not to have a max Heavy Caliber on there. Infected Clip and Stormbringer for that corrosive combination for obviously your high level tower. Speed Trigger for a charged weapon, same as your bows, is pretty much essential. Vol Acceleration is a new crap mod that was released recently, and yes, the 90% fire rate and negative 15% damage is justified here. So Opticor has an extremely long charge time. Again, that extremely long charge time is reflected by the fact that the total damage is so much higher than sustained DPS, even despite having all these, attack rate mod on here. Now, if you look at Speed Trigger, the attack fire rate increase is only 60%, while acceleration is 90%. So yes, that negative 15% damage sucks, but it's justified. Now, practically, I've put Shred on here. If you just have a look again at these numbers, searching out for Hellfire, we have about nearly 4,000 increase in total damage, as well as a nearly 2,000 increase in sustained DPS. So why do I put Shred in here? Well, as I explained, you can pretty much one-shot all enemies anyway for everyday gameplay, so why not have that increased fire rate, that, ability to kill enemies faster when you're going to one-shot them anyway, right? So that's just justification for that. Now, we will have a look at the Paris Prime as well as the Dread. So, yes, slightly different build. I do not use Heavy Caliber on both for two reasons. The first reason is both, again, you want to charge, and because you're charging, you're investing time into charge, so you want to make sure you hit a headshot. And Heavy Caliber have a very noticeable effect on both, even at short range. And the benefit of hitting a headshot does slightly outweigh I guess a heavy caliber miscalculation of hitting a body part. And don't forget, with heavy caliber on there, you may actually miss a target altogether. So that's why I don't use heavy caliber on there. Now I do want to quickly mention that the total damage and sustained DPS you can compare between the bows, but you can't compare the bow with the Opticor. Just because, again, with bows you would be doing headshots pretty much 99% of the time, so these damages aren't that significant because you would be doing so much more damage. In fact, most of the time, you should be doing your sort of, I guess, half six figure or your 50,000-ish damage, so your, I guess, five figure damage, if that makes any sense, numbers anyway. So again, compare between the bows, but not the Opticor. And other than that, I just want to say, yes, the Paris Prime have a slightly less damage compared to the Dread as far as total damage, but the Paris Prime actually performs so much better than the Dread as far as tower goes, just because you got nearly 2,000 puncture here, which is for armor, Guinea, heavy gunner, versus the Dread, which has slightly over 2,000 damage on slash, which is actually for infested. Now the second reason that I do not like using heavy caliber in bows is because the fact that bows have a traveling time, the projectile traveling time, as well as a slight arc, especially at long range. Now both of these factors pretty much mean that the accuracy decrease from heavy caliber is magnified. Alrighty, so we'll jump into some gameplay now. Alright, so I'll do a little bit of gameplay over here. Now, one thing to note, the Opticor does have a bit of AoE effect. So in high level gameplay, not that significant, but in low level gameplay, it definitely does make a difference. And as you can see, you don't even need to do a full charge. You can still do even, half charge, and can quite easily kill most enemies on the solar map. Even in Pluto, you can do that quite easily. Might as well get that Oberon part. So yeah, even in Pluto, you can, one-shot enemies with half charge quite easily. There's no worries there. But when you are at high level, 60-minute plus, I definitely recommend doing full charges all the time. Not so much because of the ammo efficiency and whatnot, but merely because full charge does do a lot more damage. And when you are doing headshot, you want to make sure the invested time into a charge is put into a headshot. So might as well. So this weapon is pretty good for assassinations and whatnot, just because it does do pretty decent damage. Again, I only have a corrosive build on here, so it's used it pretty nicely. So 2-shotted LV and 2-shotted Danuka. So I'm pretty happy with that. Alrighty, so now let's have a look at how practical this weapon really is. So if you see the green dot on the door over there, we have a distance of about 60 meters. So you can see it's pretty accurate. I call it pinpoint because you can pretty much aim there, you get a head. So if you imagine that green dot was a heavy gunner's head, you can pretty much do a guaranteed headshot. But it's not really pinpoint, just because you do see a bit of split here and there. Just because, well, you got heavy caliber on there, so you do intend to see a split, but the split is not really significant most of the time. That split there was pretty bad, but most of the time the split is not that significant, so yeah, heavy caliber is definitely justified. So finally we'll look at the attack rate of this weapon. So you can see most of the time you're pretty much doing a half charge anyway, so it's actually barely even noticeable. I mean, yeah, it's obviously there, but it's not that noticeable. So I'm pretty happy with this weapon. Initially when I first started this weapon with no attack rate increase, it was such a pain to use. But once you do put all your speed mods on there, and obviously the fact that you can fire this weapon at a half charge, it does make this weapon quite practical even in, I guess, standard gameplay such as your, I guess, Jupiter gameplays and whatnot. Alrighty, so next we'll jump into some, I guess, Paris Prime and Dread gameplay. So we're in a T3 Exterminate here. Now the Paris Prime needs no introduction. It's been in the game for a long time, and it's top tier. Hands down, it's top tier. As you can see, you can pretty much, consistently do 5-figure damages, no problem. But obviously, you need to land a proper headshot. So if you do a body shot, you probably want to do 5-figure. But if you do a headshot, you should be able to do 5-figure, no problem. And the charge time with the Paris Prime is, well, with speed trigger alone, it's pretty decent. It's really noticeable. It's obviously better than the Opticor. Again, the same story here with the Dread. You can pretty much, single shot enemies. So if you do a body shot, you pretty much, won't be able to do a 5-figure. But if you do a headshot, you should be able to do a 5-figure damage. And again, the charge rate is really noticeable. It's obviously there, but it's pretty decent. And the reason I did such high damage against the Infected there was because of the slash bonus from the Dread. And for those that aren't aware, the reason we're seeing a bit more red crits with the Dread is because the Dread does have a slightly higher crit chance than the Paris Prime. So obviously, if you do a crit beyond the 100%, so if you hit another crit on top of the crit, you basically get a red crit. And finally, we'll have a look at the Opticor. So again, this is with Shred. So we'll see how much damage this weapon does. Now, if you remember with the Paris Prime, we're doing about 15,000-ish. And with the Dread, we're doing, also around that number. And a bit higher with, obviously, red crits. So that was about 17,000, I believe. And of course, with Shred, you double shot. That was obviously a fluke. You want to do double shot all the time. If you do a body shot, which I completely missed there, about 8,000. Body shot, about 8 to 9,000. And again, if you hit a headshot, okay, that was a bad headshot, if you can call it one. And obviously, one thing that you should remember with the Paris Prime Dread, you can hold down your left mouse button to maintain a charge. With the Opticor, you can't. So it's basically, you get it, you don't get it, you don't get it. Alrighty, so yeah, so we're looking at about 17,000-ish for the Opticor as well. So that's with Shred. Okay, so finally we're going to have a look at the Opticor with Hellfire instead of Shred. So before we proceed, we'll just have a quick look at the fire rate again. So we'll go with the full magazine, and we'll do 4 quick shots and a charge shot. So I mean, it's barely noticeable the difference between having and not having shreds, but I can tell you from leveling this weapon to level 36 times, there is a difference. So we'll have a look at the damage potential. So 20,000 and 73,000 on a crit. Now, don't worry about crit with this weapon. Obviously, it has a crit multiplier, and obviously, you'll do crit here and there, but it's not that high and it's not that reliable, so I wouldn't worry about crit with this weapon. Now, on the top of crit, compare this to bows. The bows obviously do have a crit multiplier, and they do depend on crit. And obviously, the fact that the way crit work now is if you go over 100%, you get a red crit. So bows do have that extra RNG to consider, whereas the Opticor, don't have to worry about that. So yeah, so there we did another 20,000-ish damage with the Opticor. And what this ultimately means is the Opticor has high, reliable base damage compared to the bows. Now, personally, I do prefer the Opticor in high level survival and defense compared to the bows, just because I do feel it do a bit of higher damage overall, and of course it has that better ammo capacity. So it uses rifle ammo with a 540 base ammo versus a bow which have, I think, a 72 or something base bow ammo. And of course the Opticor don't have projectile, they don't have that arc, they don't have a traveling time. It's pretty much, hit scan, instant hit, and obviously it has that better aiming utility long range compared to the bow for that reason. Okay, so conclusion time. Now, as with a limbo review, I'm going to do a scoring system with weapons now as well. So with weapons, we have low level speed kill. So that's basically how fast a weapon is able to kill low enemies as fast as possible. So, less than level 25 exterminate, invasion type missions. So Opticor, I give it 3, just because, let's face it, the Opticor is not meant to kill low level enemies. But because it does have that slightly AoE effect, I do give it a 3. Now compared to something like the Amprex, which will have a 10 here. So just to give you guys an idea, high level utility. So Opticor is built for high level gameplay. It's built to slaughter those level 150 plus heavy gunners. So it definitely deserves the 10 there. If you compare to something again like the Amprex, which will probably score a 4 here, just because it has high base damage, but it's not meant to kill high level enemies. AoE potential, yes, Opticor do have a slight AoE potential, so I give it a 6 over here, but it can't compare with something like the Penta, which obviously will score a 10 here. Now, subjective factor overall, so Opticor is, as far as the, I guess, Warframe world, it's quite an original weapon. Obviously, it's just a lot of weapons out there that's like the Opticor in other games, but in the Warframe world, the, I guess, charged laser is fairly new. Obviously, charge is been around for a while. It's around with the Lanka, it's been around with the Paris Prime, or both for that matter, but I kind of feel the design and everything is quite new. As far as enjoyment factor, I really did not enjoy this weapon at all. Yes, I enjoyed it in high level gameplay, but come on, leveling it to level 36 times, you're not gonna do it at 60-minute T4 survival. You're gonna be doing with your T3 mob defense, your T3 exterminate, and trust me, using this weapon in those kind of missions is not fun. So I give it a 3. Overall score 5.5. And compare that to the Paris Prime. So again, I will have a look at the Paris Prime and the Dread together, in fact. So neither of these weapons are really good for low level speed kill. I've given the Paris Prime a 10 and the Dread a 9 for high level utility. Again, just because most of the time that anyone do high level than tower, and Paris Prime have that better puncture versus the Dread, which is mostly slash, I give the Paris Prime a 10. But to be honest, the Dread is almost 10. AoE potential, these weapons obviously have no AoE potential, but I give it a 3 just because, hey, if you are doing low level gameplay, you can definitely put on Thunderbolt, which is not recommended for bows, but you can put on Thunderbolt and that will give you a bit of AoE potential. As far as enjoyment or subjective factor, Paris Prime, again, I just don't like these charge type weapons. I've never liked them. I appreciate their potential, but I never really liked them. I give the Paris Prime a 3 and the Dread a 4. Just because, hey, come on, red crits, right? Dread does a lot more red crits, and everybody loves red crits. But more importantly, I kind of feel these weapons should have the same score, so 4.5 for both of them. Alright guys, that's about it. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.